Live in beautiful downtown Boston, rebuilding America together. This is the Jeff Santos Show.
Welcome back. It is the Jeff Santos 772-925-8206 phone number to join us. We start off our Tuesday as we usually do. We go out west to the great city of Seattle, Washington, and the great Northwest and talk to a great independent journalist. You can check him out on Twitter. He is fantastic on that device. And, of course, you can find him, follow him on Twitter and follow him around the country at Daily Kos and many other sites. It's always great to have Mark Taylor-Canfield with us on Tuesday. Happy Tuesday, Mark. How are you?
I'm good, Jeff. I'm, just keeping my eye on Nevada right now and what's happening with Bernie Sanders. I think it's turning out to be a very, very interesting election in that state as well.
It is indeed. And with that, of course, the vote coming up on Saturday, I tend to think, and it's obviously not monolithic, but the independence, if you want to call it the libertarian view of a lot of folks that live in the Rocky Mountain West and live in the Pacific West, whether it's the Northwest or down in California, there's a sense here that Bernie Sanders is not the Washington, D.C. establishment, having lived in California. And I remember you said, oh, you're from back east, like if that's some kind of disease on the East Coast. And I think there's something there. And even though Sanders grew up in New York and, of course, is from Vermont, he is not part of the establishment. I think that's actually helping him and hurting Secretary Clinton, who has been of Washington and of New York, and been part of the establishment for a long time. And I think that may be playing in Nevada. What do you think about that? And maybe that's a sign of things to come as we move into Washington State and Oregon and Colorado in a couple of weeks, and, of course, California down the line.
Well, Hillary Clinton got a head start on the Bernie Sanders campaign in Nevada, that's for sure. So he's been playing catch-up at this point. But if her travel plans are any indication, they're a little bit worried. The Clinton campaign is a little bit worried about Nevada. She was originally only scheduled to make some short stops there. Well, she's spent 3 days in Nevada. So there's an indication of what the Clinton campaign is thinking. And Sanders didn't even open an office in Nevada until November 1st. But now he has 12 offices around the state. And he also hired Joan Cato, who was Barack Obama's outreach coordinator for the Latino vote during his campaign. So there's a very significant issue in the state, which is 28% of the Nevada population are Latino. Also, 60% of the population are 34 years old or younger. Now, that plays right into Bernie's strategy of trying to get out the young vote. Even as recently as last year, the unemployment amongst the black population is 15.4% in Nevada. Be appealing to people on an economic platform as well, and I think he'll get some good resonance there. He's definitely gaining momentum, but Nevada is famously difficult to poll. But according to John Ralston, he's a longtime observer of Nevada politics, and he has the Ralston Report website. He's saying that the Clinton campaign is panicking. And if any of Hillary Clinton's latest fundraising appeal emails are an indication, the campaign's very worried about how much Bernie Sanders is able to raise from individual contributors. In fact, in New Hampshire, I believe he outspent the Clinton campaign about 2-1. So there is an upswell for Bernie Sanders in Nevada right now, and there was a poster seen at a Bernie Sanders rally in Las Vegas, which said, finally a reason to vote. So he's getting some people excited who maybe haven't really gotten involved in politics before in Nevada, and he potentially could bring out some new voters, which is going to also tip the scales one way or another. There's a lot of libertarians, of course, in Nevada. It's a very libertarian state.
I want to get with that, but I want to mention one thing. You mentioned how close this is. The culinary union, which plays a big, big role. It was a huge issue with Obama and Clinton back in 2008, when you had a split with Latinos on one side and African Americans on another. I don't know what that split will be this time, but it's very interesting that once again we're coming down, to the support of these folks that work in the casinos and the hotels in and out of Las Vegas primarily, and a little bit in Reno. And this is a big part of that state. What do you know about where the supporters are going? I understand that Secretary Clinton had a lot of people who were involved in the culinary union but didn't get the endorsement. Then Santos was supposed to get it, but that didn't happen. And there was some, people wearing T-shirts that weren't supposed to be wearing the same T-shirts of the culinary union. What are you hearing about that? That union plays a huge pivotal role in who wins, particularly in a close race.
Absolutely, Jeff. It's the biggest union in Nevada. I believe there are about 58,000 members, and they do have the ability to really organize the membership and get them to the polls. So a huge influence in Nevada state elections. And at the moment, they are sort of playing both sides. They have decided not to make their traditional endorsement, which is leaving the door open to both candidates. So there's a big controversy within the unions, and that's typical of some things I've seen up here in the Northwest as well, where sometimes the membership or the leadership are on a different page. And in this case, I think they're split right down the middle at this point. I don't know which way they're going to go, but I do know that Bernie Sanders is very popular amongst labor unions. Those are his top 5 contributors, especially the Communications Workers of America, who are saying that, their number one priority in 2016 is getting Bernie Sanders elected U.S. president. So if that's any indication, I think the unions in general are swinging towards Bernie Sanders, because he has much more of a working class kind of everyday Joe sort of platform style, and I think that really appeals to people. Whereas, like you said, Hillary Clinton is known as an insider, a part of this sort of Clinton dynasty, and a lot of the trade unions are not so happy, at least the membership especially, are not so happy about the Democrats' stance on a lot of these international trade agreements like the TPP. So that could also play. But, Nevada is unpredictable. They're very independent there. They definitely have a civil libertarian streak going on, free gambling and prostitution, and there's definitely an effort there to legalize marijuana at this point. So it'd be interesting to see how some of the conservatives or libertarians go on this too, because eventually they are going to vote in the U.S. Presidential elections, and he seems to be attracting conservative voters. There's been articles at Daily Kos and at The Atlantic lately about that issue, and some people in the Republican Party are just saying the Republicans don't represent us anymore. And also, one of the latest polls is showing that at least 60% of Republicans agree with Bernie Sanders that corporations wield way too much power in the United States right now. So between the young voters,
finish your point.
First-time voters, the Latino population, and the unions, I think he's got some good support in Nevada. So he might surprise the political consultants once again.
He definitely will. Talk with Mark Taylor-Canfield here on the Jeff Santos Show. I think he's going to win in Nevada, and I think it's going to help him get it to be a little closer. I'm not sure if he can win in South Carolina because it's a whole different territory. You're heading into the Deep South, a lot different perspective there. They have been a state that has gone Republican for a long, long time. To change that and to get the middle-class white voters, which we'll talk later with our good friend Ken Ruse at SEIU in New Hampshire about, to me is an example that across the country, particularly in the Midwest, I think that Bernie Sanders can do very well, and I think he'd be key for the Democrats to nominate to win in those swing states, particularly in those states where there is going to be a Senate battle, so who controls the Senate in places like Wisconsin, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Illinois, and New Hampshire, all swing states. We're right back with our good friend Mark Taylor-Canfield. You're tuned in to the Jeff Santos Show.
Live in beautiful downtown Boston, this is the Jeff Santos Show.
Back live here on the Revolution Radio Network. It is indeed the Jeff Santos Show. 772-925-8206, the phone number to join us, talking with our good friend Mark Taylor-Canfield. Michael Flanagan comes to us at 4:06. John Nichols at 4:34. Mark, there's a lot going on in the great state of Washington, and you have a congressional seat, the progressive Jim McDermott retiring. There's talk of the great progressive that is a city councilor, the socialist, potentially running for that congressional seat. What's the latest on that and what that means for the great city of Seattle? That would make a huge imprint, and obviously would continue in the Sanders tradition of democratic socialist, progressive, who are true progressives, being in the Congress.
Yes, well, it will be interesting to see how Bernie Sanders does in the Washington caucuses and primaries coming up. The primary coming up in May, but there is a huge progressive tradition here, and it's one thing is very obvious, Jeff, and that's that a conservative Democrat is not going to win this congressional seat. The district that Jim McDermott represents is one of the most progressive in the country, and he was a very popular congressman, elected usually with 80% of the vote, which is almost unheard of. But some of the people who have actually officially jumped in include Pramila Jayapal, who was a big supporter of our Democratic Socialist City Council member, Kshama Sawant. And so she has officially entered the race. She is definitely describes herself as a bold progressive fighter, and it comes from an activist background. She's done a lot of work on immigration reform, and she is East African ethnicity herself. So she comes from a different culture, and she is looking at the way that immigrants are being treated in the United States, and so she would definitely have some strong stances on that. City Council member Sawant has not said whether she's going to run or not, so she's keeping that door open. It'd be interesting to see the two of them both running because they tend to be friends, so I'm wondering whether maybe it might be one reason why Sawant won't run, because Pramila Jayapal is running. She's currently a state senator in the state legislature. There are also some other names that have been thrown around, including another state legislator, David Frocht, and then our King County Commissioner, Martin Luther King Jr. County Commissioner Joe McDermott, who, by the way, is no relationship to Jim McDermott. But it is kind of interesting that someone with the same name wants to run for that office. So both of them have been, as they say, running it up the flagpole to see if anyone salutes. But it's a lot of names have been put forth, including former Mayor Mike McGinn, former Mayor of Seattle, a current City Council member Mike O'Brien, who's been a really strong progressive. And then we have our long-term City Council member Nick Licata, who's probably one of the... I just wrote an editorial about him for the Capitol Hill Times. He is probably the most progressive member of the City Council in the history of this city. And he's retiring this year. He's actually written a book called How to Be a Citizen Activist. And so he's running around doing a book tour right now, as well as finishing up his term with the City Council. But, I will mention his name just because I think that it's someone who should have been considered from the beginning as well. However, I think a lot of the local media here probably isn't mentioning him because of his, wish to retire from politics. So I think he would probably my indication from him is he would rather get involved directly in some kind of national organizing and activism organizations. But the seat is still open, and only a few candidates have actually officially announced that they're interested, so the door is open. One name that's been fostered lately is Jenny Durkin, who is actually our former U.S. attorney in Seattle, who's now practicing at a private law firm, but her name has also been floated about. But one thing is for sure, it's a very left-of-center progressive seat, and anybody who wants to get elected in that seat is going to have to stick to the Jim McDermott tradition of groups. I've talked to some of their membership, and they were not all that happy with the decision by the leadership to support Hillary Clinton. Bernie Sanders is currently circulating a petition to make $15 an hour a national minimum wage. So he is, I would say, more in line with the thinking in the city of Seattle and King County and at least the western part of Washington State, and probably our own congressional delegation, our own governor. They've all been very supportive of a $15 an hour minimum wage. There hasn't been much talk about even compromising on that issue in this area. It's 15 or nothing is basically the attitude of most people around here that are organizing around that issue. And most of the groups that have been offshoots of the original Seattle 15 Now campaign across the country, there are so many of them. They're like Bernie Sanders websites now. I can't keep track of them all, but there are so many organizations now across the country that are fighting specifically for the $15 an hour minimum wage that I think, Hillary Clinton is going to have a hard time on that issue with people in the Northwest. It's even with the phase-in of the $15 an hour minimum wage in this area, it's still not going to keep up with the cost of rents in Seattle and a lot of other major cities around the country. So compromising to 12 would not work in Seattle. It's just not sustainable.
It doesn't work in a lot of markets around this country. New York, Seattle, Boston, D.C., Chicago, San Francisco. Those wealthy coastal cities for the most part. That's a really big problem. Well, we'll see what happens. It's great to always talk to our good. Welcome back. It is the Jeff Santos Show. 49 minutes past the hour. We finally got a hold of John Nichols, and he'll be with us momentarily as we wrap up this segment. Again, the phone number to join us, 772-925-8206. 772-925-8206. We will bring in our good friend John Nichols in a matter of seconds here. One thing, folks, that is really important, I think, for people to realize is that you can make the change. This is not one of these things, you can't fight City Hall, you can't make it. A lot of people would never believe that a guy named Barack Hussein Obama could win. No, nobody ever thought in the 1960s, that John F. Kennedy could win. A Catholic. We never elected a Catholic before. So all of these things, small state governors like Bill Clinton, they had to be from a big state, Virginia, California, Illinois, yada, yada, right? So New York. So we've proved time and time again, if people get excited, if they are understanding what is at stake, then in my opinion, we will be able to make change. And that is an important piece of this. Can you have John Nichols, Shane?
Not right. I'm trying to do something.
All right. Let's bring in our good friend John Nichols. John, can you hear me?
I sure can.
Very good, my friend.
Yes, I can.
All right. It's great to have you back. I'm glad we could get you out of the interview. All right. We were just talking a little bit about the importance of this election, and I think that Senator Sanders, gives a lot of hope to a lot of progressives. How do you look at the next couple of weeks here between Nevada and South Carolina? If he wins Nevada, and comes close in South Carolina, does that put him in a good position going into March?
Well, without a doubt, you come out better if you're posting wins, or at least exceeding expectations. I think that it's probably true that Sanders has to win something before the end of February to be well positioned to go into March. And so, in addition to his very big New Hampshire win and his essential tie in Iowa, if he were to score a Nevada win, I think that would be huge. I think it would be very, very important to building out his message. If he were to come within a credible distance in South Carolina, where he was down, as recently as late fall, he was under 20% there. If he could get into the 40s, which is, a climb and not necessarily guaranteed, but if he could get into the 40s, I think, he could go toward those March primaries and caucuses seen as a very viable figure. Remember, the March 1st set of elections in multiple states from a lot of different places, Sanders is likely to win a couple of those. They tend to be, the places that are potentially sympathetic to him, where he's done some organizing. He's probably going to lose some of them, too. But if he posted a set of pretty decent wins in February, if you're coming out of February in pretty good shape, you can handle a pattern of wins and losses. On the other hand, if you're in a situation where New Hampshire is your win, and then from there on out it's a loss in South Carolina, a loss in Nevada, even if it's close, and then you go to that March 1, and you post a couple of small state wins but a lot of losses, then the narrative goes against him. So it cuts either way. If he's posting wins and doing better than expected going into that, and then does well on March 1, well on March 8, well on March 15th, then he's got the narrative on his side. And remember, the last element I just throw into it is this, that Hillary Clinton is still very much the presumed front runner, right? And so next,
but I think weakened though.
Oh, without a doubt. No, that goes without saying. But the next stage in this is, does she lose that clear front-runner status, still remain a very viable candidate, but lose that status, or does she renew it? And that's probably as relevant a way to look at. If she loses that status and is considered to be in a clear one-on-one race, very even race with Sanders, that in and of itself is a radical transformation of what's going on.
No doubt. Talking with John Nichols here on the Jeff Santos Show, and I tell you, John, I really believe that the race is going to come down to those March 15th states, where you have Illinois, you have Ohio, and of course Michigan a week before, Florida, of course. These are big
North
states.
Carolina.
These are swing states.
Big lots of delegates. Lots of delegates, and you don't have California or Pennsylvania, New York; they come later. But those states, I think, are a great indication. I really believe that if Bernie Sanders can win in places like Ohio and Michigan, which will be a big plus come the fall, then I think that he will be the nominee. I think if he doesn't, I think it's going to be very hard for him to put together a coalition without that. So those Midwestern states, including yours in Wisconsin coming up, I think are very, 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 very vital to this. And I think it is, again, in the general election. I think Donald Trump, will have some success there because of his trades issue and other variables that he brings to the table. Your view? Well, I totally agree. I think that's exactly right. In fact, I've just been writing about the Trump appeal on some of these issues. I was fascinated in Saturday night's debate when all of the Republican candidates were basically just trashing on one another, and it was frankly silly. But then at a key point early in the debate, Trump started talking about the closing of the Carrier plant, the Carrier air conditioning plant in Indiana.
Yes, I heard that. I saw it. Yes.
On target. It hasn't happened yet, but it's being planned. And then he came back to that issue later in the debate, re-emphasizing it. This is rare in American history where you've had a candidate, either political party, go deep into the sinews of these economic issues, to talk about plant closings and how they relate to trade policy and how they relate to tax policy, tariffs, things like that. And so it's clear that Trump is thinking ahead. He is thinking and talking as a nominee. And he is thinking and talking about issues that mean a lot to places like Indiana, Ohio, Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania.
Water, you put it through a filter that's, coming from a clean source, in this case, Lake Huron, and you move it forward. You don't try to save money and go to a river which basically has been corrupted and has been polluted. I mean, it's a place that GM has been throwing crap into the river there. I mean, this is again a failure of government, and primarily by the Republicans, but some Democrats are also responsible. And the EPA under President Obama, was telling Mr. Montebello, I think his name was, that just shut up and then stand down. That's not effective government.
I mean, because of the right-wing movement, the right-wing turn, aided and abetted by the powerful elite in this country, it's like we have to relearn all the lessons we learned over 100 years ago. We learned about water. We learned how important it was. We learned how important it was to have good government-run infrastructure with good public employees who had a lot of experience and know-how doing it. And now we have to learn the lesson all over again literally experiment with the lives of young African-American kids in Flint with conservative ideology, which is toxic when you get down to it. And so we're going to have to learn a lot of other things, apparently. We have to learn that you don't need workers' comp. There are all these states around the country, ProPublica has done some really good investigative reporting on this, that have essentially made workers' comp optional, and there are a lot of people getting permanently injured who get very little compensation and can't work, right, and are literally left out in the cold. What's next, Jeff? Are we going to have to learn that child labor is not a good idea again? I mean, that's the direction things are going unless we halt it.
Well, you can pollute all the air you want. Let's just bring back factories at this point, pump in carbon monoxide and carbon dioxide. Let's let cars run. Let's not have any, limitations on what kind of gas you can get and pollute. That way, we'll just let the whole thing go. Let private enterprise take care of it. I mean, that's what we're headed to. And whether we're talking about, go ahead.
You know what Scott Walker did today? He put out an executive order, it was actually late yesterday, forbidding any state official from working on a clean power plan on global warming. This is because they now know that the Supreme Court is a 4-4 deadlock, and there'll be no decision this year probably because of what Mitch McConnell and the Republicans are going to do about the Scalia vacancy. But that's what we see here right now. I mean, literally, it's almost like it's unbelievable. No state official is allowed to work on a global climate disaster or to follow what the president, even look into what the president is proposing or investigate what it would take for the state to comply. So that's
Robert Craig here on the Jeff Santos Show. It is a disgrace, and I'm really hoping, and I think that Sanders really is our last chance here to look at government and how government can help people. And I think he needs to talk about it more. I think Secretary Clinton, if she's smart, would also jump on that bandwagon because, we have the other side has owned this issue. Really, since about 1978 or so, when we started, taking money away through the Prop 2.5 and Prop 13 in California, to the election of Ronald Reagan, where government, the words, even though he said it differently, is government sucks. And, this to me, government is not the solution. It's the problem mentality is something that we've been seeing now for some 35 years, and it has to change. It really does. Robert, we'll talk about this next week. Thank you, my friend. Always great having you on the program.
Thank you. It's always a pleasure, and it's about divide and conquer. That's what they're pushing, and that's what we need to fight back against. Have a great week,
no doubt.
Jeff. Great to talk to you.
You too. Always right, always correct. Mr. Robert Craig of Wisconsin Citizen Action. Follow him on Twitter, my friends. I want to thank our good friend Shane for producing this broadcast with help from our good friend Ron Kreider, our TV folks, Gio Santori and Freddie Santori.